not every day I get to talk to one of the best MMA coaches in the country, but that is the case today. Mr. Adam Copley, he is the coach at the War Training Center. Adam, thank you so much for being here, man. It's great to see you again.
Thanks for having me. And you're lying. We talk almost every day.
We do. You tolerate me. And I'm very much appreciative of that. I wanted other people to have the benefit of also getting to talk to you. So I put out some feelers and was like, come on, people, like, take advantage of this, take advantage of my friend and ask some questions. And we got some really interesting ones in my mailbag. I'm going to ask you a few, and you can see that we really took advantage of this opportunity because the very first question is about Dragon Ball Z. And we want to know, thank you. You know who you are. Who is your favorite Dragon Ball Z villain? And there were some suggestions that were queued up, and I don't know any of these people. So I'm not even going to try to say those names. So why don't we just ask you what your favorite Dragon Ball Z villain is? I'm assuming that's anime.
Yes,
I'm kind of old and
was never into martial arts though, and not be into Dragon Ball Z at all.
I know I'm an outlier, man. I don't know. I've never seen an episode. Honest to God, I know. Who is your favorite villain? The green guy, or is that like a hero?
So in Dragon Ball Z, a lot of the villains end up becoming good guys, but I would say my favorite's Vegeta, because I mean he was a villain at one point, and he's one of my favorite characters. My favorite saga is the first Frieza saga, though.
Oh, right. I don't know what that means. So whoever asked that question, actually, it was Joshua who asked that question. I'm like 99% sure.
But those answers.
Okay, this is a really interesting question. Thank you for whoever sent this. It looks like some random. Uzman versus Leon Edwards. If you were coaching Leon tonight, like, what would you say to him? Like, what would your game plan be? When you look at a guy as good as Kamaru Usman, obviously nobody's perfect. Like, how do you attack a guy that good?
And in my opinion, he's going to have to utilize great footwork. And Usman's got pretty good footwork as well. But, I mean, the best case scenario for Edwards is that Uzman decides to test his striking and not play the grappling game. And I still think Uzman wins, but that's Edwards' best chance. I think if Edwards can entice him into a striking battle, he has a chance to clip him. But, man, I still got Uzman winning that one. It's tough. And Uzman can go out there and just make it completely one-sided by grappling. His grappling is that high level compared to Edwards. But I think he'll go out there and strike a lot more and have fun. And he's got a great jab, man. He's got a ton of power in his strikes. Even when they don't look the cleanest, they're still hurting people. And his footwork's, all the Trevor Whitman guys got good footwork. They move on every two strikes, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I look at a guy like that and, of course, because, the nostalgia trip, we always like romanticize the past. So we always go to GSP. I'm not taking anything away from him. He's definitely on the Mount Rushmore of like best mixed martial artists of all time. It's hard for me though to not include Usman in that conversation. That guy is just so good. He's almost cleaned out the entire. Well, he has cleaned out the entire welterweight division, and the welterweight division.
State's going through twice on him now.
Right. So like what's really next for that guy? We'll see.
I guess.
We'll see. And I think it's one of those things where it's like, appreciate guys like this while they're still around, because you're going to miss them when they're gone. Like, you're going to notice like a crater in 170 once guys like him leave.
My favorite Usman fight was actually when he took the belt from Woodley, which is not how he fights now. That was old Usman. Usman, since he's been with Trevor Whitman and left Henry Hook, not to say anything against Henry Hook, he's a great coach too, but I think that style really meshed well with Usman, and his striking's leveled up so much. But that Woodley fight, he was grimy, he was filthy, he laid on him, he leaned on him, he stomped him, shoulder strikes. Like, I love that kind of fight. Like, most people were booing it and bored with it, but I'm like, this is complete domination. And Woodley was the champ at that time, and we're running through guys. And obviously Woodley since then is not the same, but it's almost like Usman broke him mentally there.
I think people forget how good Tyron Woodley really was at once upon a time. Everything really started, like, the wheels started falling off shortly after the Darren Till fight. But that's a fight that was like where he was still fighting at a very, very high level against Darren Till. And you saw how good he was. Like, you saw what he was able to do to a guy like Darren Till. And again, the wheels have since fallen off for Darren Till also, to be fair. But anyway, that was one of my favorite fights. Tyron Woodley, since we're mentioning him. And it's one of those things where it's like, no, give credit to Uzman for fighting that fight for when he did, because Woodley was at the top of his game when those guys collided. And
Absolutely. And no one could do Woodley like that except for Uzman at that time.
yeah, like don't think about the boxing fiascos. Like, you really have to like reset your brain 6 or 7 years ago, because he really was at the top of his game.
Absolutely, man.
As a coach, what is one of your biggest pet peeves about fighters?
Laziness.
Oh, laziness. Give an example. Like what do you like? Laziness in terms of what? You could qualify that many different ways.
You're right. But inconsistency in training, taking easy ways out, not putting in the extra work when they're in training, saving as much energy as possible instead of pushing themselves to expand and get better. Like, I just can't stand laziness. Like, if someone's lazy, I won't work with them. Like, I have high standards for our fighters. We're always bettering those standards every year, but I can't stand lazy people, man. I just can't stand it.
I think you're gonna have it's gonna be a rough road for you if you're not willing to like tap into your full potential in this line of work, and get comfortable with the uncomfortable. I think that's what being a fighter is all about. That's something that you that's obviously something that you're very qualified to speak of. I know that once upon a time that you were a professional fighter in your own right. You since walked away from the sport. But I wanted to pick up on that. Like, I know that you left competition in 2016. Can you, what was kind of going on in your life at 2016? Like, what compelled you to get into the coaching element of things and leave competitive fighting?
Man, I just I didn't have the time to put into it. I was working a full-time job and running a gym and coaching on the side, and I was putting minimal into myself. And then I had my second born in 2016, bought a home with a wife in 2016, working 60 to 80 hours a week, coaching 20 hours a week. It was really a time thing. Like, I never really took on that role as just as someone being trained and getting work in. And I never had enough time in my schedule to do that. And I wasn't willing to, at that time, to sacrifice the things I'd have to do in order to be a successful fighter. Like, I would have had to give up a lot of things and make sacrifices and give up a lot of money. And at that time in my life, I wasn't ready for it. I wish I would have been, started a little younger. A lot of injuries had taken me back to. I've had tons of injuries, mostly in training, like facial fractures and ribs and breaks and everything else, tears. And between, I don't know, man, it just wasn't in the cards for me. And my mind was still on the game. I've always been in the gym, banged up or not. And I just feel like I had a lot more success going as a coach. In order to push my body and athleticism, I have to be real selfish. And I wasn't going to be real selfish that time in my life. And as a coach, it's kind of the other way around. As a coach, I'm selfless, and it works out really well.
Well, one of the things that I think is so interesting, 2016, it wasn't that long ago. I remember 2016 very vividly. I also had a child born in 2016. So our kids are the same age. Like, yes, it was like 6 years ago. Yes, it kind of seems like a minute ago, but like, I remember back to that hospital. I remember being back in the hospital. I remember what was going on in the world of MMA at that point in time. Like, yeah, it does seem like it was a minute ago. Here we are in 2022. But going back further from like when you fought as an AME, when you had your pro bouts, compared to like what the game of mixed martial arts looks like today, that's quite an evolution. Can you talk a little bit about just kind of like your perspective, seeing things and seeing the fight game for what it was back when you were active compared to like being a coach now in 2022? Of like, what strikes you as like what's changed in this game the most since you've left active fighting?
The science and the technique behind it. In 07 is when I started. May 07, I started training, like 07, 08, and then a little bit 09. But I did, like, back then, there's so many cards available nowadays, right?
Right.
Like, back then, amateur fights in Texas were pretty much like on a res or unsanctioned events and being thrown outside in bars, and like, it was a different scene. And now there's amateur cards every single weekend. So like, that's different. The other difference is, like, now that there's a huge following of UFC, I feel like COVID helped blow that up even more so, with them being the only, live sports going on ESPN at the time. Like, now there's so many new fans coming into it. There's kids starting off in the sport. Back then, like, everyone was getting to the sport at kind of the same age I was.
Right.
Like, I was like, I guess 19 when I started getting involved in the sport. And then the reason I got involved is because I had a cousin who did it like 7 years prior, and it was just very rare back then. There was only a couple black belts in all of Houston back then. And, it was just a different game. So, but nowadays, like, I see a lot of gyms still doing the old school methods, like just be tough, just spar hard all the time, and just do a lot of conditioning. And not that those things aren't important as well, but I mean, the game's so much evolved. You see guys like Max Holloway schooling people, and he's not even sparring anymore. Like it's just a different game altogether. Back then, if you were athletic and you were tough, you're going to win. Now you can be the more athletic guy, the tougher guy, but if you're not technical enough, you're getting your ass kicked. It is what it is. It's a different game.
With the rise in the popularity and with more and more eyes being on the sport, in some aspects, is that maybe not a good thing?
Yeah, I guess so. And I'll say this too. I wish there's just so much better coaching and things and tools out there nowadays. Like now, like back then, you're just killing yourself to cut weight. Now there's science behind it. There's methods. I wish I would have had myself and people like me as a coach back then. I feel like I could have gone far in the sport. And not that I didn't have good coaches, but they were good coaches at this, good coaches at that. I didn't have like a true MMA coach all around all the time that could help me with all those things. And when I started coming around and contact those people, it was like later in my life. And I've learned a lot more since I stopped fighting than I did then. I feel like I've evolved technically. I've evolved, on the science behind things and the training methods and, how things should be approached and, the standards we should keep, and everything's just different, man. It feels like it's rapidly evolving. Like every single year you see new things going on in the sports, new techniques, and then you see old school stuff coming back too. Like You see calf kicks happening, but everyone trains with shin guards nowadays, and everyone's got out of the habit of like checking stuff or kicking and sparring without shin guards on. So the calf kicks will happen for a while, and before you know it, people will start breaking their legs trying to do a calf kick and getting checked on those, and then it'll go away again. And just like I feel like a lot of the wall work and a lot of the clinch is still like a lot of teams are doing the same thing they were doing 20 years ago, and there's so many techniques and things that evolved there. So yeah, it's exciting to see, man.
It's one of those things, like when you were fighting in 2007, 2008 compared to here we are 2022. When you were fighting, like you were a cage fighter, right? And people thought you were pretty freaking nuts and like this guy's fucking insane to do what it is that he's doing. And now, like in 2022, not to say that it's still not an extreme sport. It is. This is a sport that is not for everybody. But I'm thinking of it, it's like, because it's more accessible, I wonder if some of that edginess has gone away. And I don't mean that in a good way, because sometimes I'll watch some of these cards. I'll go on Facebook where they're streaming the undercard for like LFA or CFFC or whatever the case may be. And I'm seeing like these guys that are like 36 years old and they're like 0-2 and they're going in there. And it's like, what are we doing here? Like, I don't know if you realize what it is that you're getting into, even if we are talking about an amateur fight. And I was just kind of wondering, like, do you see a lot of people like in those amateur ranks on these undercards that you kind of look and you're like, what? You really shouldn't be here. Like, no offense, like not to be a dick or anything, but it's like, there are consequences to this. Like, yeah, you might be fighting at a low level. There's no pay involved. Like, nobody's going to the UFC. We understand that. But at the same time, bad things could happen that make people that fight at your level, the people that are the real professionals, they could suffer as a result of somebody not knowing what the hell they're doing and getting themselves killed in there.
Absolutely, man. It's a dangerous sport. And part of that comes on promoters. You see a lot of promoters taking in bums off the streets to fight seasoned professionals who don't even know they're supposed to have an amateur career and don't even know anything about coaching. Everyone just thinks they can fight. They're tough guys, and they hit up a promoter. Hey, I want to fight for you, and they coerce them into it and put them up with someone they have no business being in there with. So a lot of that comes on promoters. But that's it, man. All these individuals, especially males, think they can fight without experience because they got in a few street fights, and it's just a different game. Like, just because I played some pickup basketball, I wouldn't say I could go out there and like beat a professional in basketball. It never happened. But it's the same aspect, but people don't think of it that way.
They should, because I look at it and I'm just like, okay, the work, like the actual fight is the cherry on top. All the work happened 3 or 4 months prior to, like the weight cut that had happened, the cardio, the training when you weren't maybe feeling so hot. Like, there's so many sacrifices that have to happen, and you have to like get your body in peak form to even make that walk. And if you don't like go through that rite of passage, you really risk killing yourself. Like, I'll go ahead, like that sounds extreme, but I really believe that. Like, it's not that hard. If you don't know what you're doing, somebody like me walks in there, you're gonna get killed 100%.
Dude, absolutely. I mean, even people that do train at a legit gym, there's a lot of hobbyists involved.
Yeah.
I don't really work with any hobbyists. There might be a few, but they're putting the same work that my pros are, because we have standards, and like the only way I'm going to coach you and the only way you're going to fight under our banner under the war banner is if you're meeting those standards. So make sure that they're ready. But a lot of places like, okay, he wants to get a couple fights in, he's training hard, and they think they're putting in enough work, and they go out with someone who has a different kind of standards that's not a hobbyist, and they get slept, they get hurt, they get permanently injured. It's a big deal.
It absolutely is a big deal. One of the things that I wanted to like kind of key up on is the War Training Center specifically. You start coaching there, and I feel like there's a lot of things that I've picked up on. I've talked to several of your fighters. It seems like you guys do things a lot differently. Can you describe like how did the War Training Center, how did it come about? Like, what is the coaching philosophy? It seems like you guys do a lot of things that are maybe, I don't know if unorthodox is the right word, but it's just different. Can you describe a little bit about like what the mentality, what the ethos is?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, outwork everyone is definitely like our ethos. And me and Jeremy opened basically War Training Center, I think 2018. I came over a few months later, but even when he first opened it, I was over there a lot. Jeremy Mahon is the former owner of 4 Ounce Fight Club, and he brought on partners and eventually sold off his portion of the gym. And when he opened up War Training Center nearby, I moved over there with him, and we've always had a good relationship. We trained and coached together over there at 4 Ounce previously, and he's got a ton of experience. He was Tanya Evinger's coach when she fought through Invicta and then fought for the world title. He was Derek Lewis, Pineda. He's cornered a lot of these guys back in the past, especially like Houston MMA people. So he's got a lot of experience. But yeah, me and him have always gotten along. We share similar philosophies. We have slightly different approaches, I guess. Like, not that we have different approaches, but we have different focuses. Like, Jeremy's a great discipliner, a great motivator. He's got good technique as well, but like, he gets people like going, like he gets them in the right mindset. He makes sure they're working hard, and he pushes their lungs in training to areas they didn't think they could go. And then he makes them savage. And I try to take a different approach where I just try to make everyone as technical as possible, and to where a point where everything's muscle memory and they don't have to think in the cage. Like, it's automatic for them, So, I make them smart. He makes them savage. And together we've just always had a ton of success together, man. And so now we've been going out this at war, and we've been averaging like an 80% win rate since. And I got laid off from my job January 1st, I think it was 2018, or January 3rd. And like 2 days later, I was about to take another job. My wife was like, just be a full-time coach. You're already coaching. You want to do this full-time. Like, we make less money, we make less money. And I was like, okay. And I made some goals and started doing it, and was over there like full-time. And I basically, I had so much time at first because our fight roster was small. It was like 10 people back then. Wow. And they were doing really well, but it was only like 10 guys, And it was really a couple of people that came with us, and a couple of new guys. Like Snow was new, Reid was new, and some of those other guys were like not even amateur debut or one fight amateur at that point, So it was a really young team. And so I just took my business approach to it. I was like, I'm used to working like 60+ hours a week. So I started putting the hours in on film, hours in on studying, on planning practices. I started like standardizing everything. And that's what me and Jeremy have really worked on, is like making a system. Like, this shirt says War Fighting System. And it is like, we systemize everything. Like, we have a very business approach on all our standards, and we change those up every year. Like, at the beginning of the year, we send out standards across the team. And like this year, we're doing it for our pre-amateurs, our amateurs, our pros, and our UFC fighters, and like expectations and training expectations and diet, lifestyle, things you need to be doing. And, and those things I think really translate over. And like I do like a root cause analysis every time we lose, and like take extreme ownership. Like, even if it wasn't something in my control, I make it something that should have been in my control, and basically when you always take faults on every loss, it really helps you improve the system, as just blaming it on the fighter or blaming it on the ref or the judge or anything else. Like, every single time we lose, like, I do a huge analysis of every single breakdown of what we could have done to prevent it. Like, someone lost because of cardio. Well, guess what? Now we're pushing their lungs. We're doing like 20-minute rounds in training sometimes, And now we're doing things where we make them run their miles, and they send it to me on their Nike app, and all these things that we incorporate into our standards. Now it prevents those things from happening. Now we're not losing because of cardio. And
wow. So like, you have like an actual like fight matrix of sorts.
Man, if you could see through my phone, I have notes, and I have notes on every fighter in the gym. I watch sparring. I pull my phone out all the time. People might think I'm on my phone. I'm actually taking notes, like, they messed up on this. They need to change this detail on this. And when I get time to work with those fighters individually or in a small group, that's what we go over. We fix those things. So like, everything is notarized. And I do like huge film breakdowns on opponents. I'll watch, like, say they have a dozen fights, I'll watch all of them once, do a little breakdown, a synopsis. I'll do the second time, and I'm like, what's their game plan? What should our game plan be? What are they good at? What are they weak at? What are things that we can expose them at that no one's exposing them at yet, but that I'm seeing in holes? Like, maybe they're getting overextended on their jab and we can leg kick them, but no one's been leg kicking them yet, you know? Or maybe they got really good head movement, so we can like throw it straight just to get them to circle into a head kick, you know? Things like that. Like maybe they're not getting exposed on it, and just do like and then I incorporate that into their training. So all through camp, they're drilling those things and like, all right, we're going to keep doing these things over and over and over again. That's part of your training of all these drills I took down in notes. And then I'll go through a couple more times and just keep adding new details. And hopefully by the time they get in fight day, the things we've been working automatically on everyone, regardless of who they're sparring or who they're drilling with, it'll be stuck in their head and ingrained in them so much that they'll be hitting it live and it'll be against the perfect opponent to hit those things on.
That's really fascinating to think about. And like, I'm kind of like marinating on all the things that you said, and I'm really curious to see, like, just not knowing, like what are other like approaches other people use, and I guess what I'm trying to get at here is like, you have a very like detail oriented thing. You talked about like breaking down all of these fights, and you have Giles that's in the UFC, and then you have a Bellator fighter. What's his name?
Cleveland.
Okay, Cleveland. Everyone else, if I'm not mistaken, everyone else is like on the regional scene for the most part, or Amis. Is that right?
I mean, Charlie was in the UFC.
Okay.
I mean, he suffered a nerve loss, so I'm assuming he'll get cut after that. But even still, like, I think he'll have big things in the horizon going forward, like maybe karate combat or other things down the road. We'll see. But yeah, we've had, you know, a couple at this time. We just got Trevin and Rakim on the big shows, and probably Charlie as well.
So the reason why I ask is because when I think about like the Fortis MMAs, when I think about the Jackson Wings, when I think about the Sanfords, and it's nothing against these gyms. I'm not suggesting because they're big, they're bad. I'm not suggesting that at all. But let's be real. Like, people move gyms all the time, and you go on Tapology and you go to these guys, and I'm not going to mention anybody specifically, but I'll give you an example. There's one fighter that I know that trained on the East Coast, got poached by a gym over on the West Coast. This fighter ends up moving. The new coach was like, we want you to drop down a weight class. And I'm thinking to myself, knowing this fighter and knowing like their build, I don't see that happening. Botched weight cut, was supposed to fight today, was supposed to fight. The fight's not happening anymore because of a botched weight cut. You probably can figure out and connect the dots and figure out who exactly I'm talking about. I won't do that here, but it's just these like little things. It's like you see all these fighters move, and like this appeal or allure of a big gym, and then I feel like some of these people get in there, and maybe their best interests aren't at heart. I know another guy. He had a life circumstance going on. He had to move for school. He goes to a big gym in Arizona. I won't say the name of the gym, but you could probably figure it out. Fucking hates it. He's like, nobody pays attention to me. No one, I could stroke out from a freaking heart attack in the middle of that gym and no one would give a shit. He's just like, I hate it. I can't wait to go back to my small time gym. So I kind of want to like level set, like, what is it about all these like big gyms you think that like appeal to all of these young fighters? And like, what are some of the things that you have had to deal with? Because you have a really good success rate against some of these gyms. I would imagine there are a lot of people that are either trying to like steal you or steal your fighters. So I just kind of want to level set. You talk about all the things I just kind of mentioned, the allure of these big gyms, your success rate against them, and then maybe trying to like poach your people and your spiel on that, because I'm sure you have one.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think the allure of the big gyms is they're popular. They're being told by people in media and past fighters and past reputations that it's a great gym to be to. And a lot of these gyms that these guys are coming from are gyms that aren't going to get them where they need to be. They're not necessarily even real fight gyms, or they're missing techniques. So they go to these other gyms and, you know, they have bodies there now, and that's a big difference. And I think, you know, they're just not used to getting pushed. Like a lot of these people are the top fighter in their gym and they go to these other major gyms and they're not. So at least they're getting good looks on sparring and bodies and things like that. But man, a lot of these big gyms, there's some really good ones out there still. There's a lot of them that I thought were a world-class gym and they're not anymore. And you see it, like they're starting to lose. And the reason is because I think these coaches got too content and they stopped evolving their game. The sport evolved and they did not evolve. But yeah, we have to deal with it all the time. Every time my fighters go out of town or they visit another gym, like they're getting recruited by these other gyms. Oh, you should come here. Oh, you should come here. Like, I'm not worried about that, but it's annoying. I'll even have people emailing and messaging and Instagramming and DMing, trying to get my fighters all the time. Like, oh, you can come here, train for free, live here for free from all these other major gyms. And I guess it's a compliment to our success because we're killing on the regional level. I mean, we're like an 80% win rate this year against gyms with, against major gyms. And I consider major gyms with 10 plus UFC fighters at them. And we're like an 8% win rate against them. So we're doing really well. And to me, like the difference is these gyms can no longer develop. Like they're outdated. So that's why their up and comers that they grew aren't having the same success. And meanwhile, we're like 4 years in and we have guys that we've been training from the ground up in 4 years that'll beat their guy who's been with them for 10 years. And it just shows the development differences there. But at some point, like people are going to start treating us like a huge gym too. It's already starting to happen. We have people coming from all over, hours away, moving down from different states to be at our gym. So it's already started to happen. Like we've taken notice on a lot of these guys. The key to us is what we've had to do is continue to like evolve what we do as coaches and systemize it better to make sure we don't do the same mistakes that these other major gyms are doing. Like I want to have that involvement. If at some point down the road, I feel like we have too big a team and too many lazy people, then I'll probably stop running like class training most of the time. And I'll start working with just individuals in small groups, but I'll capture that problem when it comes. Like we'll figure it out then. I'm not there yet. But obviously, like we're running into issues like where we're trying to build dorms or figure out like sleeping arrangements for people that come in from out of town. We'll have UFC fighters come and visit, train for a few weeks. But the biggest difference too is like we have a lot of guys who aren't big names yet because we're a young team, but we have guys that are killing it and beating the guys that are big names. Like we'll have UFC fighters come in the gym from other cities or other places, and they'll go with my guys that have been training for a handful of years on the regional scene and doing success here, and they'll lose rounds to them, and it'll blow their mind. They come in expecting the tough rounds with the guys that are names there. I mean, we have a good training relationship with Alex Morano too, and his guys over at GB the Woodlands. He's over with us. Like we train with him a couple days a week. And so like him and Ricky and those guys will come in too. So they come in to spar with Alex and Ricky and Trevin and Charlie and Rakim and some of these other names. But then they start losing rounds to our guys who they don't even know who they are yet. And I think it's eye-opening to them. And that just shows where we're at. I see guys that are already at that level, and I see my guys who aren't there yet. They're going to be there. Like their skill set's there. They just need the experience and maturity in the cage still.
One of the things that I find so fascinating about just kind of like where you guys are is, again, like you really have to like dig deep and like be into the regional scene. And that was like one of the first things I remember like I wasn't really paying attention. This was kind of before I knew you. I'm watching Fury or I'm watching the regional promotions on Fight Pass. I'm like, this guy's really freaking good. And then you're there. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. And then I start noticing a trend. Like these people that like stand out to me, like you or Jeremy are in the back. And I'm like, where is this gym? I've never even heard of this gym. Where is this place? And then I just kind of like got into like this like wormhole. And that's how I figured out like, wow, okay, this is like, it's like a place I circle on the map. I'm like, this is a place where they're on to something. And I don't think a lot of people have quite figured them out yet. You have Reid, who's probably one of the most gifted fighters that I know of. And he's getting ready to make his professional debut. But that guy is just so advanced and so gifted already. I'm just like, I'm not just saying this, like there'll be haters. There'll be people that roll their eyes when I say this, but I'm telling you, look at the guy's tape, go on YouTube, look at his fights and tell me he couldn't fight against an unranked guy in the UFC. I bet you he could, and I bet you he'd win too.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, those tapes are 2 years and 8 months ago. He's even better now. So much better.
And he's just one of your fighters. You have a whole stable of these like really young, really gifted fighters. And like when you kind of like sit back and knowing you have all these like young studs, like, is that a challenge in a sense? Because they're all grinding, they're all at mostly that same sort of level. Maybe we're 2 or 3 fights removed from like being on the radar at some of these like big promotions, with everyone being at that same level for the most part. Of course, I'm excluding your fighter in the UFC and then of course Bellator. But like, is that kind of stressful in a way because everyone's kind of at the same point, and like, at different stages of your career, you might need a different coaching relationship?
Man, no, like a lot of these guys are young, and there's 2 things about being young. One is like the ones that we started with when they were real young, we can mold them into be a well-rounded fighter. Like I feel like all of our young fighters are very well-rounded. They don't have holes in their game. The guys that came to us later in their career, like they have holes in their game, we got to play catch up. But the younger fighters, they got good striking, good wrestling, good jits, good everything, good conditioning. And so that's a plus. Like I like the young fighters. The problem is like the maturity level sometimes like their lifestyle, like they'll party too much, or they'll eat incorrectly, and they'll make stupid mistakes in their lives. They won't get enough sleep. They're out there chasing girls, and it's keeping them accountable. So I worry about, like, when all of them get in the show, are they going to be too young to handle like the extra money and fame and those things? And that's really what I'm concerned about. Because my goal is not to get them to the UFC. Like, it's clear, like, half of our roster is going to be in the UFC. What I want is these guys to stay there, because when they get to their third contract, if they're taking care of their money the proper way, like, now they don't have to worry about working the rest of their life. They can have enough passive income.
Yeah.
So they can invest this money and do the right things. And that's what I want to do. I want to change their lives. Like, I want UFC champs to have coaching goals, but like, in all, if they've had a good career and they got some fame and money out of it and can, like, live enjoyably, or enjoy the rest of their lives, then I'm happy. Like, I changed their life. I took someone who might not have ever had that kind of success, and now they might not have to work another day in their life. And that's what I want to get them to. And that's my goal as a coach.
One of your fighters that you have that I've become a really big fan of, and it's ironic because he fought one of my friends recently, but Murphy, Michael Murphy, that guy is something else. I watched his most recent fight. He's an example of a guy that you didn't have all the time. He's an example of a guy that I don't know if rehab's the right word, but you had to completely, like, fix everything. You got him later on. That guy has impressed the hell out of me. Can you talk to me a little bit about Murphy in particular? That's like a reclamation project, and you're, like, bringing out a new level of this guy that I don't even know if even he knew he had in himself.
I think he always believed in himself. Like, mentally, he's always been a dog and always assumed he'd win every fight. So that was great. He's always had dynamite in his hands, but he's really a street fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what he was when he came in. He had a little bit of skill, and he trained at a couple of gyms, and then right before he came to us, he'd gone down to Sanford MMA, and he'd gone to, like, Jackson Wink and a few others, and then he ended up staying with us. But man, he came in and he had dynamite in his hands, but he was just missing out on some of the technical aspects and some of the training aspects and the bodies. And man, he's a guy who was 2-3 on a 2-fight losing skid, and now, so he came to us just over a year ago, and now he's cleaned up a lot of his game. He's a well-rounded fighter. He used to just brawl people, and I told him after his last fight, I'm like, he started off this fight like a brawl. Like, that's not you anymore. Like, look what happened when you start striking technically. You dropped him, not with the brawling. I was like, when you got on the ground, you out wrestled him, you out jiu-jitsu'd him. Like, you are now the more technical fighter. You no longer have to swing for the fence on every strike. You still have that dynamite, but you don't have to do that anymore. And it's true, man. He's 5-1-1 in the past 11 months since he's been with us, from 2-3. So now he's 7-4-1, getting some looks, getting some opportunities coming up big his way. I think a couple more wins, he can make a call to one of the big shows. And those 2 losses, that one in New Jersey, very close fight. That was Texas. He probably wins that fight.
Yeah.
Rob for CFFC came to us as we walked out of the cage, and he's like, you got screwed. You got robbed. Like, you won that fight. You landed the most damage, and he didn't do anything when he did get on top. And then you look at Ricky Romo out of Fortis. He got a draw on that fight, but it's because the ref took a point away for an elbow to the back of the head that cut the guy right here above his ear. It was side of the head. It was a bullshit call. It was a hometown call. But really, in my opinion, he could easily just be called 7-0 in the past 11 months. Like, he's doing great. And a lot of these fights, too, he was the underdog on paper. And that's the thing. I think 80% of the time, we are the underdog on paper. Like, they have a better record than us. We're fighting good guys. And I think that'll pay off, because when they get to that next level, they're going to be familiar. Like, this person had striking like one of the guys I fought before. This guy had grappling like this guy I fought before. This guy was strong like him. And they'll have these people that they're fighting on this scene. Like, they already have aspects of people that are in the UFC and in the big show. So it won't be unfamiliar with them. And they got tough fights, and they get experience, and they grow from it instead of just fighting bums all the time.
I really like that guy. He's one of the guys in your gym that every time he fights, it's just kind of like, I make a note, like, okay, when is he fighting? Like, because I'm going to watch him. And I did talk to Rizko after his fight. I was like, dude, that guy hit. It looked like he hit you hard. He's like, yeah, dude, that kid's fucking tough. Like, he's like, that guy was fucking tough. But that it was a really good fight. It's one of those shitty situations where 2 very good fighters, but that's the name of the fight game. Like, someone's gonna walk out of there with an L. That sucks. Ooh. But you know what? I look at him and I'm just like, if you want to talk about a success story, it's not the guy that you can build from the ground up. It's like getting a guy later on in the game, fixing the things, fixing
Thiago's
the
another
issues.
One. Yeah. Thiago was 0-2 before I cornered him, and now he won. He's 5-1 in his last 6 fights in just over a year. And he's fought all good guys, been underdog on paper on most of those. And he's another one that's just having success like that. And I'm happy about that. He came over to us, again, another tough guy. He was fat. He was out of shape. And just tough. And that was about it. Now he's a well-rounded fighter. He's teaching kickboxing up at the gym on some nights and stuff. And, you know, he's got a ground game in there as well now. So like, yeah, man, I'm excited about that. I love that, man. These are guys who a lot of people would have counted them out for their career, like 0-2 or 2-3. And, you know, they're not going to go anywhere. And then a year later, they're like their names, their prospects, like they're potential UFC fighters or Bellator fighters in a few fights, you know?
I think it's incredible. You have one other fighter I wanted to hit on real quick before I let you go. She's going to be on the show. My tomorrow. I don't know when people are actually going to watch it. It might be, I don't know. It'll be when it is. But anyway, Rain Guerrero is going to be on the show tomorrow. Watching her fights, she's somebody that, man, it's just like, wow, like this girl knows how to fight. She's 3-1. She fights at 135 pounds. I know she wasn't
25.
always.
This next one's 125.
Okay, so I was going to ask you this question, and you already answered it. I was like, 135. That's like a really. I'm surprised you've been able to keep her as active as you have. That's a really. I think of all the bantamweights, women's bantamweights, she would have been like the second one I think I've ever talked to in like 150 episodes of doing this show. So with her going down to flyweight, she's what, 5'5", 5'6". Can you talk?
5'6", I think, yeah.
So 5'6", 125 pounds. That's not too much of a stretch. I know a lot of the 125ers are like in that 5'4" to 5'6" kind of range. What compelled you to suggest to her to like go down? Because my first question was, have you ever thought about like telling her to go down to 125? It's already happening. What went behind that?
Honestly, she could have made 125 her last fight. We were trying to book at 25. The other girl wanted a catch of 30, so we did a catch of 30. Rain the night before weigh-ins gets down to 130 the night before with zero sauna. Like she could have made 26 that night. Mm-hmm. And then the girl comes after we already cut the weight and says, I can't get below 35. So Rain took her entire show purse from that girl, and the promotion ended up giving Rain a little more pay as well. And then she put a little bit, because we took pictures and video on the scale. Like, look, this is her weight right now. She hasn't even saunaed yet. We're going to fight a girl. Well, at first we were like, let's fight her at 135, but she can't come in over 150 tomorrow, because Rain was going to come in like 140, maybe 142, you know?
Yeah.
And then because that's her build. She's a 25er. And then the girl's like, no, we won't agree to that. I was like, well, 55 or something. She's like, no, we're not going to agree to that. And I'm like, wow, she's going to come in heavy. So we ended up doing the catch weight. Rain put a little weight back on. I think they ended up doing a catch of 33 is what we talked the girl into or something. And she, like I said, Rain took all her show money and took some extra from the promotion, and basically came out for a really good payday for her. And she got her out of there in the first round anyways. But we were planning to go 25 because when Rain first came to us, she fought a 35 girl in her first fight, and that girl was huge compared to her. Just huge. And then Rain still had a lot of body fat on her. Rain is a girl who used to be like 235 pounds or something.
Yeah.
So, and her debut as an amateur was only 2018. So she came to me as a 1-0 pro after beating Deborah Kutzman out of Fortis. And she was just a tough dog fighter, but I was always like a little harsh on her technique, and I didn't realize like she hadn't been fighting that long. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then she just works so hard. She's one of the hardest workers around. She runs like early morning before work, goes to work, gets off work, trains for a few hours at the gym, goes and runs again at night. Like she's like 7 days a week at it. Like she trained this morning, and then tomorrow morning she usually comes to the house, which I'm an hour drive from her. She'll come to my house because I have Matt set up here, and she'll do like 2 hours of work here and a workout, and then drive back. And then she'll do wrestling in the afternoon with Snow. And I mean, she's living it. She's sacrificing everything, but she's a 25er by build for sure. This fits her. It was easy enough this last time. Like I said, we could have done the 25 if we did sauna. We just didn't have to. But yeah, this next one we're at 25, and I'm excited about it. She fights September 10th. She's fighting Olivia Biscow or something is her name for Three River Showdown in Wisconsin. And I think this will be the one for Rain. I think this is her ticket. Like, I don't see anyone else on the regional scene fighting her, because we tried for an XKO title and they said they asked over 30 females at 25, and none of them said yes. They all said no. So because of that, like, I think this is going to be it. I don't know who else she can fight. She has one loss at 35, which was against a hometown girl in a close fight. She got the takedown in the first and the third round, and she landed more strikes. But they gave the other girl the decision anyways. You know, that girl was their amateur champ and local there. Not to say it couldn't have gone either way, but I thought Rain took it. And I mean, but since then, I think her work ethic has changed tremendously. Like, she's even working harder. She went down to her proper weight class. She puts in all the extra work. She diets well. And man, I can't wait till she's a full-time fighter, because then she'll even level up more. I mean, she's wasting 10 hours a day at work and travel, you know?
I think it's very exciting, and I'm really happy to hear that she's going to a more natural weight class. Because I was looking at her, I was like, I don't know, like 135, like 135ers are freaking massive. They're like 5'8", 5'7", 5'8". I was like,
They're bigger than me.
they're
I mean, when
freaking
Tanya was over at war with Jeremy, like I'm like, she's taller than me, she's heavier than me. Like, there's no way, you know?
yeah. So like for her size, I was like, you're talking about like a prototypical build for a 25er, and she would go into 25, and I bet you like she's going to be stronger than any 25er she's going to
Absolutely.
fight.
I mean, she drops guys all the time on accident. She's just got crazy power. And that's the other thing. Reigns been sleeping girls at 135.
Well, I mean, and then think of it this way, like I would imagine Snow is probably her main training partner, and
One
Reid
of them, yeah.
maybe, right? So it's like you fight those guys every single day, or you wrestle those guys, you do jujitsu with them, and then like you go into a cage and like you do that against a peer. It probably feels like it's cheating in a way.
Dude, absolutely. I told her, like, we have a really good female team and we have a lot of good female fighters on the team. But she's definitely, like, I feel like a step above the rest for sure. And it's to a point where, like, I need to get in like a really high level wrestling girl to wrestle her, and a really high level jits girl to jiu-jits, and a high level boxer just to box her. Because when it comes to MMA rounds, I feel like she can just beat everyone every time. You know,
Well,
and she does go with a lot of guys, and I'm telling you, she's accidentally slept guys in practice, like just timing and punch, and she has pop on her punches even when she's not trying, man. She's got crazy power. If you look at her highlights, she's slept so many girls, and that's rare in the women's division.
you don't see stopping power, particularly in the 25 class. Like when you do see it, like you're talking about like the freak show classes, like the 55, the 45s. We're just not seeing that at these lighter levels. I think that's what's so exciting about her. The fact that she can make 25, she could do it, preserve her strength. You look at the UFC 125 division, I mean, it's wide open.
I mean, if they signed Rain up for a fight next Saturday and said it's against a top 10 25 female in the UFC, I would take it and feel confident. I mean, that's just how I feel about her.
But it's really exciting to like know that she's getting her due. Like she's getting like hit up. Like there are these promotions in Wisconsin, nowhere near Houston, that are like, yeah, we know who she is and we want her to fight over up here. Like I think that's amazing.
We got to thank her management for that one. She's with Iridium, and we were struggling to get fights anywhere on the regional scene and everywhere else that we talked to. So I never heard of them even. And some guy up in that region with Iridium, with it, which like I said, is her management company, they got her that fight book. So I think thankfully to them when she has a fight, because we've had 2 other fights that have fallen off for her in the past couple of months.
Well, hey, I can understand why. Probably not somebody that you want to fight, but hey, props to this girl in Wisconsin for wanting to fight her. Most people wouldn't. I think it's amazing. Before I let you go, I wanted to hit on like one last topic, and it's simply this. There are a lot of people that I talk to, a lot of like amateur fighters, not in Houston necessarily, but they're just all spread out all over the country. What's like one thing that you would tell a fighter to look for in terms of like a good gym? Like what are some like red flags that, knowing what you know as a coach and as a fighter, what are some like red flags about gyms that these like young people need to stay away from? And what, on the other hand, is like a sign of like, no, this is probably a good place for you. You should probably train at a place that resembles these characteristics.
And it depends on their goals. For one, like if they really want to be a fighter and do this for a living, then you got to find a gym that has fighters for one, like actually active fighters, and that they have a winning percentage. Look how much they're winning locally. I see guys all the time that have a ton of potential, and they'll hop from this gym and that gym and that gym, and every gym they go to, everyone's like 500 or upside down in their record. And I'm like, I don't care how much potential you have, how tough you are, how athletic you are. When you're getting technique from these teams, like you're not going to win a lot of fights. And it's just realistic, because they might think it's good coaching, but it's because they don't have the reference of actual legit good coaching. Mm-hmm. Like when you look at good coaching, like it translates in the numbers. Like if you're a good coach, you're going to have good fighters. They're going to win a lot of fights. If everyone on your team is upside down, you're not a good coach, and you just got to like really reassess something you're doing is wrong. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people they might be a good teacher, but they're not a good coach too, right? I know a lot of guys like that. Like they just teach a lot of techniques, and they almost take like the jiu-jitsu approach to just teaching technique, and that's not the same. You got to be a good coach. Like I tell guys all the time, and in the mornings I'm always coaching. I coach the fight team, and then In the smaller groups and stuff, I'll teach a little more and go over technique and things like that. But you got to coach. It's a whole different ballgame.
So rule number one, winning percentage. I think I never would have considered that, even though it just seems so obvious now. I think for me, the one thing that I hear is just kind of like manage expectations. And I hear that secondhand after all these fighters I talk to, like, listen, if you're like an amateur fighter and you think you're going to like go into a Fortis MMA, you think you're going to go into like Sanford MMA and like get looks, temper expectations. That may not be the case. And don't be surprised if you're like hard B-side and you're not
I don't
really
know.
getting any work
Some
in.
of our Amis have dropped in some of these major gyms and put it on some of these pros at these other gyms. Of course, that's probably also why these guys from these other gyms are trying to recruit my amateurs. Even it's ridiculous, but yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised. It just depends where you're at.
Absolutely.
But yeah, man, you want to get the looks, but also like another thing is the approach to training. You got to find something meshes with you. Like, I'll be honest, like a lot of people, they're not willing to do what we ask of them. Like, our standards, like, oh, I've heard people say, oh, that's slavery, I'm not doing all that work. Well, we're just trying to set people up with the expectations of winning, and we're doing things that we believe will put them in the best position to do so. Some people don't like to put in that kind of work. And then I'm not necessarily a nice coach either. Like, I love my team, I really do. And if they put in the work, I'll put in the work for them. Like, I will put in as much work as possible. Like, next week after Philadelphia, I get off a plane at 9:45 and I'm going straight to the gym for Saturday practice right after that. Like, that's my approach. But you know, like, some people aren't about that. And some people are like, oh, you're too nice, you're too mean. They want a nicer coach. And, you know, I don't feel like I'm a mean coach. I really don't. But I'm a very honest coach, and I'm going to be very real with them on the things they need to fix. And sometimes egos get in the way with that, especially when you have veterans and stuff. You know, guys who have already had success or already been in the UFC or already been at other places, and they don't like being told these things. Like, they don't want to be exposed, like, oh, I'm messing up, and you telling it in front of other people. But I just got to be honest with them, you know?
Hey, somebody has to fill that role. Props to you. I've met you in person. I think you're a very nice guy. But then
Exactly.
again, you know, I'm coachable. I'm coachable, baby, even though I'm not a fighter. Adam, I really appreciate your time. You're a true gent. You have a lot of amazing young up and coming fighters that I think the world needs to know about, and they're going to know about them very, very soon. Look at the go to my webpage, go to like all the shows I've done, circle the names of the war fighters that I've had on this show, because I'm telling you, you know, 10, 12 months from now, you're going to see them level up and you're going to be like, what are they doing? Where are all these people coming from? The answer is right here. Is there any thank yous or anything like that you'd like to get out of the way before we call it a day?
No, that's it, man. Tomorrow I head to San Antonio. We got 2 on the Fury show tomorrow.
2 on the Fury show tomorrow. Yep. So make sure, I hope by the time that I post this up, everyone will have watched the Fury show. And I wish you and your fighters the best of success. Can't wait to do this again with you in the near future.
Looking forward to it, man.